Good morning. Welcome back. I'm Jacques Mitrani, Argonne National Laboratory Decision Information Science Division, Center for Integrated Emergency Preparedness. So my signature block on my email just goes like, this long with all the numbers and everything else. For the past 25 years, I've been doing emergency planning and preparedness for radiological nuclear power plants, the Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, and for the last 5.5 years up until May when sequestration bug bit me in the ass, I was doing FBI work for the Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate. I was with the National Preparedness Unit as a detailee, and then I spent 4.5 years with the Nuclear Radiological Countermeasures Unit. And I worked primarily with the DOE transport teams that move the material that we're not talking about in this class. And I worked with the U.S. military, the Air Force, and the Navy at locations across the U.S. where we have the other side of our deterrence. In that vein, we did this type of planning and preparedness, developing these capabilities, and we did it for a man-made event, a man-caused event. And if you don't turn it on, it doesn't work. Again, our toolbox, filling the top drawer still. So when I was given this task, I was a little concerned. I did not see the entire slide package before I built mine, so some of these slides are going to be very redundant to what I've seen other people present here. I wanted to put it in context. Risk. Risk is a function of threat, vulnerability, and consequence. You've heard that mentioned. Chris mentioned it. Ron mentioned it. I'm sure others have mentioned it too. Dr. Liu mentioned it. I think he stole my slides. I pulled mine from the DHS Risk Lexicon. And one of the reasons I did that is because right now I'm teaching risk analysis for fusion center analysts across the country. So I grabbed mine from that. The threat, natural and man-made occurrence, potential to harm life, individual entity action. We're not worried about natural causes here. We're worried about man-made events with our transportation. As we were discussing yesterday, if the truck falls over just because it did, that's not man-caused. Vulnerability, the attributes that render it open to exploitation or susceptible to an event, a hazard. The consequence, what is the effect? The end state. So we have the likelihood of a successful attack occurring, which is a combination of the threat and the vulnerability. So what is the likelihood? The consequence, the impact. The expected harm is a combination of vulnerability and the consequence, given that the attack occurs, given that the adversary is successful. And overarching, it's the risk of the attack. When I was listening yesterday and Monday, I think it was, I was listening to capability, adversary capability. That's Dr. Liu's slide. The intent of capability that the adversary has is twofold. There's the intent of what they're going to do at the end state. Once they've achieved this first objective, and then there's the the capability of doing this. They have to have this capability first. So before they set up their RED, or they set up their RDD and detonate it, they have to have this intent and capability also. The intent to get the material and the capability of pulling off that attack, getting that material, and then being able to utilize it without hurting themselves in the fashion that their end state, to reach their desired end state. As we just noted, based on our neighboring country to the south, We really don't know what their intent is, but they certainly had the capability of gaining material, even if they don't even know that they did it. So if we keep this in mind, if a group of people can obtain material unknowingly, what's the likelihood of an adversary, and we have to assume the adversary is capable in our world, of gaining material knowingly and then using it for their nefarious purposes later? So for the capabilities of response, protection of this material that we need to protect and transport, we have to recognize and account for their ability to target the shipments. As was mentioned by Dr. Liu yesterday, the deterrence value. In this slide, he was talking about the tampering-resistant seals, the monitoring, the tracking, the deterrent value. Identifying the attack methods the adversary is going to be used. What scenarios are we planning for? We can't plan for every scenario. We can plan for the most credible event. And in doing the planning for the most credible event, we'll be prepared for the unusuals also. We'll never plan for the maximum incredible event. Now, Chris says when you talk to the public and the press, you need to tell them the worst case scenario. But the worst case scenario, that are consequences, not a maximum incredible event occurring. The degree of the adversary's intent, their capability for the attack and pulling off the attack and getting the material. In this case, for what we're doing, we're not deterring, deflecting, disrupting, preemptive interdicting their end state use of the device. We're hopeful that if they attempt to gain access to material, that we will stop them from doing that. But if they gain access to material and take it somewhere and we don't know where it is, our planning for securing the transportation and the routes and everything else is secondary, because we're going to have law enforcement doing their job of gaining it back, getting this material back from the adversary. Investigation, apprehension, prosecution. The threat to the likelihood, they're going to give an attack analytical tools and historical data to assess the likelihood. Okay, getting to what developing operational response capabilities. So back to the original purpose, I guess, of the request for me to speak to this. Localized, integrated planning. Integrated, coordinated, synchronized plans and response, and training to such. If we're going to have success, we're going to have to follow those steps. Being new to this protective transportation program, protecting the material and everything else, I'm not familiar with to the extent of where that is currently across the field here. I know that our colleagues from Missouri Highway Patrol provide security for shipments occasionally. I've been told that the Illinois State Police meet the transportation shipments at the border and escort it across Illinois. I apologize, I'm not familiar with every state in the union's capability of doing such. I can tell you from the other side that information isn't widely shared as to where everything's going and moving. In this field, I would think that one of the solution sets, because we're moving material that is not weapons, that we can share with the local law enforcement when we'll be moving material through their area. If we can share with local law enforcement, then they can be involved in the development of those localized integrated response plans. Any questions so far? Any concerns? So our initial and immediate response will be provided by the security forces, either accompanying the shipment or those that can arrive rapidly upon notification. Our local first responders are going to arrive at that incident scene or that incident command post according to the notification timing and the response time and distance. If we go to a rural area somewhere between North Dakota and Idaho, and there's transportation, the magnitude of response is going to be limited. Montana Highway Patrol doesn't have a lot of officers in the eastern half of Montana. So if there's something going across there, the response will be limited in time. There'll be a delay in the time of response. In my mind, that puts us in the position of requiring escort forces. That may be cost prohibitive to the shipper, to the consignor. But it needs to be considered, thought through, worked out, and if determined that it is not feasible, it needs to be then documented as such. Because it will come up if there is an event. Why did you not have forces? That'll be one of those questions that Chris Kramer's types ask. Okay? EOCs may be activated, and those EOCs are primarily to support field response units. They are not, EOC personnel are not first responders to this event. They may have a job as a first responder, but when they're doing this event, they're sitting in an EOC, they're not responding in the field, they're not running incident command. Following ICS, Incident Command System, National Incident Management System, ICS and NIMS, that ICP will be set up where they establish the command and control, where those escorting forces set that up. You may need multiple ICPs. Your follow-on response forces need to be co-located at, and their forces may need to be relocated based on hazard prediction distances if the adversary does something to the shipment right there. If they feel they're going to be interdicted, they may decide to execute their secondary attack or their end state attack immediately, causing a crapped up scene versus what they might have been able to achieve had they been able to get away. It's a good thing I'm ambidextrous, otherwise I'd blind myself with this laser. Incident command, multiple agencies in the command structure. Area command, overseeing multiple incident commands. Unified command. Hopefully these terms are familiar to you. Coming back to my previous work for the last few years, the legal authority for the FBI to be involved as a lead federal agency for investigative actions comes from U.S. Title 18 U.S.C. 832 and 2332. The 832 is the attempt to gain access to nuclear material. Any attempt is a federal crime. Regardless of their end state use, any attempt to gain access, gaining access, having it is a federal crime. The FBI is responsible for investigating that. We'll use local law enforcement where available and where it's possible. The FBI on-scene commander is responsible for leading and coordinating those responses. The responsibility to conduct, direct, oversee the crime scenes, evidence management. So in light of other planning considerations for other events, the expected response of the federal national level response to a nuclear detonation is somewhere between 24 and 72 hours, based on the planning guidance for nuclear detonation. For this type of an event, if it's localized, if it's reported to the FBI, FBI is notified, the Weapons of Mass Destruction Coordinator, I think Ron mentioned that position Monday, There is one FBI WMDC in every one of the 58 field divisions of the FBI. There are assistant WMD coordinators. I don't know the one from St. Louis, but I do know the one from Kansas City. I know the one from Albuquerque, Dave Raymond. Dave Cudmore's in Kansas City. Dan Glavich is in Chicago. Doak Malik's in Seattle. Worked across the board with these gentlemen and ladies. They need to be notified so they can get the FBI component of the federal response going. Normally, all response is local first, recognizing that. So it's going to be the local sheriff, the local PD, the state highway patrol, the state bureau of investigation. Those entities are going to be involved also. But I think it is critical that the WMD coordinators get notified so they can get ahead of this. This attack, the adversary, may not be doing this as an isolated incident. It may not be just that one shipment, just that one piece of material. There may be synchronous events going on where the adversary is trying to gain additional material. Could be a distraction or a diversion, focusing all the attention on one location while they hit somewhere else. Again, assuming there is a capable adversary, and based on the work that I've been doing and the studies that have been done, there is a most capable adversary out there. My WMD coordinator friend in Seattle, Doak Malik, when I sent him my slides to take a look through and make sure I wasn't misstating anything, he said he wanted to remind the students and everyone else that these shipments are more prevalent than the other types of shipments. These shipments and these locations where the material are less protected than the other type. And it is important for the first responders to know who's coming in, what their roles and functions are, what the timing is, and also the hazardous materials component of the material. So they're going to use the emergency response guidebook, looking at the placard, checking that out, working those issues out, time, distance, material to have that knowledge base, but they need to know what's going on. And the way to make them know what's going on is to bring them into the integrated planning component side of this. And then ultimately, developing capabilities devolves to the integrated planning, preparedness, and exercising. Knowing that all local law enforcement, all state agencies, federal agencies work together regularly on other items, other topics. Radiological nuclear preparedness at commercial nuclear power plants, biennial exercises. They get together, they work, they plan, they drill, they exercise. They revise their plans from those exercise results. Knowing that, if we can bring other components in for this topic, for this field, for this material, we're going to enhance our ability to have success in the response. So getting those capabilities organized, knowing what they can bring to the table, or as my military guys say, what they're going to bring to the fight. There are variables in the equation of integrated response planning preparedness. The shipping and transport entities, the escort forces, and the material they're transporting. Those are variables that a majority of the time we're not taking into consideration for other types of events. So we need to take and keep these in the equation and work out how we're going to best evaluate that and improve the process and incorporate those in. Integrated planning brings together the representatives from all the different agencies, discusses their response actions. If we can integrate, coordinate, and synchronize our response, We can lead that to response improvements. There are multiple ways to do this. You do not have to do it by having mass gatherings. You can do this via the collaborative workspace environment of the computer age we're in. Not necessarily the cloud, but maybe the cloud. But there are locations. DHS has a virtual joint planning office where you can have collaborative workspace environment. You can bring people in from multiple agencies. We currently work with the state of Hawaii. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to go there for meetings all the time, so we have to use this workspace environment that we have via the computers. When I did tsunami preparedness for Hawaii County, VJPO wasn't up, so I had to go to Hawaii 6 or 7 times in a year. It's a tough job, but if I'm not going to do it, someone else is. And lastly, this is my phrase. One of my FBI supervisory special agent pals used this, loved it. Other people don't like me saying this. Truly, if we can do the integrated response planning, preparedness, and exercising side, we can change this from a pickup basketball game where everybody shows up and then you decide what it is you're going to do and who's playing what position, to where we can have it as an organized game. We can look more like Duke, maybe like UConn, maybe like the LA Lakers. Well, let's not go there. But we can make this look like an orchestrated event. And the conductor, the incident commander, the FBI on-scene coordinator, etc. Okay? Developing these capabilities, we're dependent upon training and experience. Current levels of training by those response agencies, entities, personnel. We're dependent upon that. Next, their availability. Their availability is going to be based on notification time and distance, and also what else is going on in their area of responsibility. My statement, this isn't written anywhere else, I don't believe, and if it is, that's good, but my statement opinion is it's imperative that transporting vehicles or escorts have the right comms and the correct contact information of the entities and agencies with responsibility that they're traveling through, so they can make that notification, they can improve the timeliness of response by knowing all this information in advance, having it in their transportation support plan? Security plan? Thank you. Transportation security plan, that was glitching here. Actual location of the vehicle is crucial. If the people with the cobalt shipment in Mexico had some sort of surreptitious transponder on it, we'd know where they were outside Mexico City. Be able to interdict them. My risk analysis pals reminding me that if we look at these plans, we look at the training experience, we conduct a gap analysis, we can look where we have needs to be fulfilled and focus our energy on those. Keep that in mind, the other aspects in mind, but focus less on training where training is sufficient and focus on where the gap exists. If the gap exists with our local law enforcement, our local hazmat, local fire, as we're transiting their area of responsibility, the gap analysis should show us that. We can focus our efforts on bringing them into the process. We'll save time and energy that way. And I'm fast. So we have lots of time. Any questions? Concerns?
Yeah.
Sir?
Your last statement, we'd know where they were if the vehicle, if they didn't steal the vehicle but still stole the source, it wouldn't do us any good. That's why it was important to have GPS on the source.
Awesome. And that's what the program ARGUS. Argus. You all must realize I'm new to this. I think Young contacted me on November 8th and said, can you have, or November 1st, and said, can you have slides ready by November 15th?
Just before he went to Hawaii.
Actually, it was Turks and Caicos this time.
And I know he's not going to think about us.
So yeah, so you're right. Thank you, sir.
And we would like for you to push that to all the state and federal and local people. They should be tracking the individual packages, not
Just,
necessarily, not just the vehicle. You
Ron.
can be self-serving just as much as anybody.
And why not?
Why not?
It's your show, isn't it?
Back up to slide 13.
Back up to 13. Here we go.
Here you're talking about the FBI and my interaction with the one FBI agent that I had last summer. He's in the Pittsburgh office, weapons of mass destruction coordinator. But his focus was on what he has to do if there's an event at a nuclear power plant.
He has quite a few of them in his AOR.
And what little bit time I had to discuss with him, he hadn't even thought about transportation. Do you know if any of the FBI WMD coordinators are involved in thinking about that? And if not, how can we involve them?
Yes, a subset are directly involved in thinking about transportation and shipment issues on a regular basis. They're developing local integrated response plans. Now, the subset is on the deterrent side. So our buddies who get out to Knob-Noster, Missouri. Knob-Noster is somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, near Sedalia and Warrensburg. Actually, it's a very nice place. And there's a very nice piece of equipment that comes out of Knob-Noster and goes in the air around the world. It's not classified, it's the B-2 bomber base. So Dave Cudmore, the Kansas City WMD coordinator, is quite familiar with shipment transportation for the other side. This side is where I think the knowledge base needs to be improved. But those that have those items in their AOR are definitely well aware of shipment, including my buddy down in Dallas, Chris Ford, who has to deal with Amarillo. So, to answer your question, some are. Now, the second half of your question, how do we improve that? The way I would do it is I would work through the FBI WMD Directorate, and I'd talk to those that are responsible for the WMD Coordinators Conference and see if we could get some time in the WMD Coordinators Conference, which is an annual conference, which brings most of the 58 and their assistants into a location to receive information such as from Scotland Yard on the polonium incident, from the Spanish authorities on the Madrid bombing, from London authorities, Scotland Yard on the London bombings. They do presentations and do some training in these events.
On this same slide, you say that the FBI is focused, as I understood what you said there, they're focused on investigating, but they're not the immediate responders.
A WMD coordinator, if notified, will respond to the scene, will coordinate with local law enforcement, guide and advise local law enforcement, report back to headquarters, and there will be, depending on the severity of the event, what it is, there will be an influx of FBI agents. They will be sent, depending on what it is, en masse. You could have easily, depending on where it is, 50 to 100 FBI agents showing up. If you take into account the bio event down in Alabama, Mississippi, and I can't recall if it was anthrax. It wasn't anthrax. Ricin. It was a ricin event. There were, I think, 30 to 45 FBI agents involved in and around that area.
And what would be the time frame from when it happened to when they became involved?
Again, look, it's time and distance. It's there's no shielding involved, but it is time and distance. So it depends on how many come out of that division, how many come out of neighboring divisions. That would be coordinated through the WMD Directorate, through the operations unit, WMD Ops.
And that's at headquarters?
That's in the Hoover Building,
Yeah.
through SIOC, Strategic Information Operations Center. Now, DOE has a representative in SIOC. DOE has representatives on conferences calls periodically in SIOC, let's put it that way, not the constant presence. But DOE is part of the reach back for the WMD ops conference calls for events. So if a WMD coordinator were notified of an event, he would do a phone back into Washington. They would set up an operations center conference call. They would reach out to national laboratories, DOE headquarters, DHS, other federal agencies as necessary to get the proper feedback to discuss a threat credibility evaluation between the attack and between whether this is truly a credible event, whether the adversary had the capability and intent. They'll work that out. The response will flow from there.
Any questions, comments? You guys are awful quiet.
It's early.
Well, we've got a pretty good mix here. We've got the Highway Patrol over here. We've got DOE folks responsible for monitoring. Some ship, private industry that ships. Others that are preparing to ship sometime in the future. I know that through the Otterwin program that was planning to ship to Yucca Mountain before that got dropped. There was a lot of outreach to the state level, to individuals in the state. I'm not sure it focused so much on emergency response as getting approvals to transport through the state. But I wonder if the level of communication and coordination for the private industry it has been and is as significant as it was and has been for DOE. Mike, do you have any insight in that?
As far as the security requirements, or just
Well, what kind of, when you're making shipments, what kind of reach out to local law enforcement agencies do you do beforehand?
well, the Category 3 and Category 2 shipments that we do more routinely done. There's no requirement for outreach to local law enforcement. We've found that, unfortunately, when we have tried to make any outreach, it just causes problems for us because people don't understand what we're moving and the safety and security significance of it. And then we have to spend a lot of time and effort re-litigating,
Unconfusing?
confusing.
Sounds like you need a number of Chris Kramers around here.
Right. Well, yeah, as I've demonstrated, my communication style is maybe not as effective as Chris's. But, so, if it's not required by regulation, we generally don't do it. Because it causes challenges for us and increases cost for us. But when it is required for irradiated fuel shipments, for example, that we do. We have to do a route assessment. We have to engage the local law enforcement. Fortunately, that's most commonly just Charleston to South Carolina, or to Savannah Riverside, South Carolina. It's practically routine for everybody down there. So that's the kind of the flip side of it.
When you do your route assessment with the local law enforcement, in that example, it's most likely straightforward, but does someone, you evaluate the route based on different criteria, and again, it meets time, distance, all those good things. Does someone else have to approve it and say, yeah, we agree? as well?
Yeah, for the irradiated fuel, you have to submit that route plan to for approval. And in fact, so what there are standing approved route plans that you essentially have to use. And then you've got to update it just to make sure that the points of contact and everything are still valid.
How secure are those route plans? Are they closed? Are they FOUO? Are they?
They're treated as safeguards information, which is, like I was discussing earlier, is essentially a very robust official use only.
Okay.
The information has to be marked properly and secured in a safe,
Yeah.
GSA approved locker and a secure room. It can only be accessed by people who've gone through the background checks for access to safe clearance
Okay. Well, that's nice to know because my adversary mind just went
Yeah.
apoplectic right there.
You know, there's a big class of shippers out there that ship fairly significant sources that, not necessarily shippers, but carriers, like, and it's a different set of carriers than we normally use for our material that deal with the commercial industry, for teletherapy sources, radiography sources. Some of these can be pretty awesome sources, since we're talking about the teletherapy sources. But the radiography sources also can be, you can have some pretty good size sources that get shipped, and you know, if something happens, those are, you know, some of those will be easy to steal. I mean, they're just,
Well, but that's why,
Yeah.
that's why the NRC recently issued
Right.
10 CFR 37. And before that, it issued orders to entities that possess and manufacture these sources. And we maybe haven't been able to go as in-depth as necessary, but if you go through 10 CFR 37, the rate guide, the requirements that the NRC imposes for category 1 quantities of radioactive material, which is what you're talking about, these large, high-activity sources, you're bumping up against the requirements for irradiated fuel shipments in terms of the control, the monitoring, escorting, route assessment, notifications. You're bumping right up against those. It's still less robust than the requirements for irradiated fuel, but it's significant.
the radiography sources, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've pulled up to a filling station and looked over, and in the back of a pickup truck, there's a radiography source.
Yeah.
And saw moisture density gauges, those are a dime a dozen, and they're all over the place too, but they aren't that potent for anything, just a small, usually ambi source and maybe a little cesium source in it. But you know, you got mom and pop radiographers all over the place, and most of the time it's a pickup truck with a camper on the back, and they're to and from job sites. And I mean, I've in my former days when I was an enforcement specialist for DOT, I mean, I went into these places, and I mean, once you're familiar with what they look like, you see them all the time, driving down the interstate, here and there, pull into the front yard.
Those moms and pops have really good lobbyists.
But they don't, I mean, I've gone into their, you know, their business is their living room. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to an address for a licensee and look up and went, oh, God, you know. Yeah, it's in their home, and Fido's out there, and he's about this big, and, you know. Yeah, that's their security, you know.
Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, well, with respect to the radiography sources, it's not the DOT that has to manage and enforce it, it's the NRC.
That's right.
And,
I'm not talking DOT, I'm just saying that.
well, when you were out, you were as a DOT person.
Yeah, right, I saw these.
And at present, it appears there may be a disconnect between what the licensing folk want for Part 34 and what's necessary for security of sources under Part 37. That's something the NRC is going to have to address, and I don't know what other government agency, because the NRC is the licensing authority for those sources. I don't know what other agency can have much of an effect except to go after the NRC and tell them to do their job. I did want to ask a question to Mike about the NRC approved routes. Are those static, or do they change according to threat assessments?
As I was saying, they're static to the extent that they're done once and submitted for approval, but then they have to be reviewed for each shipment and to verify that the information is still accurate and applicable. You know, like once you
But that's a little bit different from assessing the
It's,
threats.
but it's, right, it's not required to do the assessment all over again, stem to stern, every time.
Seems like maybe the gap to the vulnerability in the way that's, they handle that.
Well, just to let you know, the Offset Social Code Project was piggybacked on the shipments. And there have been a couple of times that they have asked us to change our route going out of Charleston because of some event going on. One was a biker's route. So they asked us to go out a certain direction. To start our trip out that way. So they do make it a kind of dynamic, they do look at these threats that's out there, you know, what the vulnerabilities are. And they will make suggest changes.
And that's the NRC?
No,
That's DOE.
that's the,
Yeah, I think DOE is a little bit more, in many cases, a little bit more of a.
But they do use the NRC approved route
Well, yeah,
for that,
yeah.
for those shipments. We're in that nebulous space where, you know, it's a DOE project for Chuck Messick and the DOE Foreign Research Director Return Program, but all these stretches are to avoid the NRC budget.
Yeah, that's because he has an agreement with the NRC. This is what I'm trying to address in the work that we're doing with security, is to get out of that regime.
Godspeed.
If we can. Thank you.
Thank you.